Radharani Mati, whenever you're ready, you can start, Mati.
Sure, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna to all dear devotees. Please accept my humble obeisances. All goes to Srila Prabhupada and Guru Maharaj. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistaki. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 16, King Chitraketu meets the Supreme Lord. Text 1. Sri Sukadev Goswami said, My dear King Parikshit, by his mystic power, the great sage Narada brought the dead son into the vision of all the lamenting relatives and then spoke as follows. Text 2. Sri Narada Muni said, O living entity, all good fortune unto you. Just see your father and mother. All your friends and relatives are overwhelmed with grief because of your passing away. Text 3. Because you died untimely, the balance of your lifetime still remains. Therefore, you may re enter your body and enjoy the remainder of your life surrounded by your friends and relatives. Accept the royal throne and all the opulence given by your father. Text 4. By the mystic power of Narada Muni, the living entity re entered his dead body for a short time and spoke in reply to Narada Muni's request. He said, according to the results of my fruity activities, I, the living being, transmigrate from one body to another, sometimes going to the species of the demigods, sometimes the species of the lower animals, sometimes among the vegetables, and sometimes to the human species. Therefore, in which birth were these my mother and father? No one is actually my mother and father. How can I accept these two people as my parents? Text 5. In this material world, which advances like a river that carries away the living entity, all people become friends, relatives, and enemies in due course of time. They also act neutrally. They meditate, they despise one another, and they act in many other relationships. Nonetheless, despite these various transactions, no one is permanently related. Text 6. Just as gold and other commodities are continuously transformed from one place to another in due course of purchase and sale, so the living entity, as a result of his fruitive activities, wanders throughout the entire universe, being injected into the various bodies in different species of the living different species of life by one kind of father after another. Text 7. A few living entities are born in the human species and others are born as animals. Although both are living entities, their relationship are impermanent. An animal may remain in the custody of a human being for some time, and then the same animal may be transferred to the position of other human being. As soon as the animal goes away, the former proprietary no longer has a sense of ownership. As long as the animal is in his position, he certainly has an affinity for it. But as soon as the animal is sold, the affinity is lost. Text 8. Even though one living entity becomes connected with another because of a relationship based on bodies that are perishable, the living entity is eternal. Actually, it is a body that is born or lost, not the living entity. One should not accept the living entity takes birth or dies. The living being actually has no relationship with so-called father and mothers. As long as he appears as a son of certain father and mother, as a result of his past fruitive activities, he has a connection with the body given by that father and mother. Thus, he falsely accepts himself as their son and acts affectionately. After he dies, however, the relationship is finished. Under these circumstances, one should not be falsely involved with the jubilations and the lamentation. Text 9. The living entity is eternal and imperishable because he actually has no beginning and no end. He never takes birth or dies. He is a basic principle of all the types of bodies, yet he does not belong to the bodily category. The living being is so sublime that he is equal in the quality to the Supreme Lord. Nonetheless, because he is extremely small, he is prone to the illusionary by the eternal energy, and thus he creates the various bodies for himself according to his different desires. Text 10. For this living entity, no one is dear, nor is anyone unfavorable. He makes no distinction between that which is his own and that which belongs to anyone else. He is one without a second. In other words, he is not affected by the friends and enemies, well wishers, or mischief mongers. He is only an observer, a witness of a different qualities of a man. Text 11. The Supreme Lord Atma, the creator of cause and effect, does not accept the happiness and distress that result from fruitive actions. He is completely independent of having to accept a material body. And because he has no material body, he is always neutral. The living entities, being part and parcel of the Lord, possess his qualities in a minute quantity. Therefore, one should not be affected by lamentation. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, thank you, Radan Mataji. Hare. Yes, Sundarachala bro, you can start bro whenever you're ready.
Okay, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Radha Mataji, for reading today's verses. And um, my humble obeisances to all the assembled devotees for hearing today's Krishna Katha. So, as a continuation of the chapter 16, as a continuation of the past of Chitraketu, which has led to the birth of Vrutrasur. And upon the inquiry from Parikshit Maharaj, this pastime was narrated by Sukadeva Goswami about the past of Vrutrasura, the demon, seemingly looking like demon. So this whole canto, the sixth canto, is actually talking about the loving maintenance and care given by Lord Krishna. So as you know, this is one of the part where Poshana, the sixth canto actually addresses the main topic of Poshana. We will discuss today of how Chitraketu meets, Chitraketu actually, after having, as we heard from yesterday's session from Krishna, His Grace Krishna Venudas Prabhu, how Chitraketu was able to come out of the lamentation phase because of his loss of his young son. So how he was able to come out of that lamentation phase into equanimity with the enlightenment given by Angira and Narada Muni. So when somebody is in lamentation, as we heard, it's difficult to uh, somebody who is lamenting at that time, they are open for spiritual enlightenment. Some of the That's why Narada Muni came at the right moment. Angira Muni has came at the right time and enlightened him at the right time. Earlier, Angira Muni could not do the same thing. He could not enlighten. He could not convince Chitraketu that You cannot have a son, right? But still, he wanted desperately his son for his he being the king and so on. So because now Chitraketu has had to face the providential, withdrawal of his son, because he's not supposed to have a son. So Providence has withdrawn his son very early. So seeing that, he started lamenting, and his wife started, Kutadyuti started lamenting, and all the uh, you know residents of the palace, have started lamenting, and their lamentation could not be stopped. So after the enlightenment of Angira, the lamentation has subsided. Chitraketu Maharaj could overcome that. Now, in this 16th chapter, we will discuss the further teachings when the lamentation of the other residents of the palace, including the queen, could not be controlled. At that time, what happened? What did Narada Muni do in order to control the lamentation of the people? So that is what is the subject matter of this chapter, followed by. So we will have that a brief summary of it. Mhm. So we will start with brief prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this is a very long chapter. Chitraketu meets the Supreme Lord. This is how the chapter is titled. Chitraketu meets the Lord. In this chapter, you will find essentially 3 to 4 sections. You will find how Narada Muni brings a dead son back to life, and then dead son speaks to his relatives of Chitraketu Maharaj, and then Chitraketu Maharaj chants the mantra with which he was initiated. Just in the previous chapter, at the end of the chapter, 15th chapter, Narada Muni has initiated Chitraketu Maharaj with a mantra, and that mantra is explained. He meets the Lord Sankarshan in this chapter, and he offers prayers to Lord Sankarshan. So Lord Sankarshan gives instructions also. There are very long purports actually in this chapter, and Narada Muni, um, there's a question why he brought the dead son back. Basically that's because though Chitraketu was transformed, relatives and queen were still lamenting. So Narada Muni had no other. He came up with this ingenious thought of bringing the dead son alive and start convincing the people. So when they hear from his dearest son of Chitraketu, the lamentation will be pacified. That's the thought. So that is the first verse, basically, right? And the second verse, actually, Sri Narada Uvacha, what is Narada Muni saying is, O living entity, all good fortune unto you. Just see your father and mother, all your friends and relatives are overwhelmed with the grief because of your passing away. So this is a kind of an experimental learning where a jiva was brought alive so that he can preach to these lamenting souls. And some of the speakers may not be of much effect, provided the crisis and situation. But when the child speaks, when the dead, that too a dead child speaks, yeah, it will make a tremendous impact. And here Narada is saying, just see your father and mother. Your parents are lamenting for passing of you. And in one sense, when Narada Muni going to speak, uh, this is a similar incident what you can recollect from how basically here Narada Muni is speaking, is trying to preach through that dead son. Is making with his yogic siddhi, he's able to make the dead little boy speak, and he started preaching the. So if there is a parallel, similar such incident happened somewhere in Bhagavatam, if you remember, where Sukadeva Goswami, soon after his birth, right, there is a verse that actually the second chapter and second verse, Yam Pravrajantam Anupecham Apeta Krutyam Dvaipayano Virahakatara Ajuvaha. Virahakatara is intense separation from his son, Dvaipayana. So the Veda Vyasa is having intense separation, because as soon as he's taken birth, Putriti Tanmataya Taravo Bhinetos. So that son, Anupetam Apeta Krutyam, he never had any proper uh, ceremonies undergone. He is not reformed by the sacred thread ceremony. Without these purificatory rituals, he just left to the forest soon after birth. So that's why, due to that lamentation, what happened? Putre titanmayataya tarvo bhinedos. Vyasadev ran after him, calling out, "Oh, dear son, please come back." So only trees echoed in response to the Vyasadev's call. And in that purport, actually, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes that Sukadeva Goswami entered the minds of the trees and preached Vyasadeva. Why are you so attached to your son? Like that, Sukadeva Goswami entered their minds and spoke to Vyasadeva through the trees. Similarly, Vyasadeva also got attached to son. If you see in comparison, like Chitraketu was attached to, and his relatives, kinship, were attached to the son. Similarly, Vyasadeva also got attached to the son. So Sukadeva Goswami entered minds of trees to speak to them, not to be attached. So here, as you can see, but the comparison is attachment towards the pure devotees here is equivalent to attachment towards the Lord. Sukadeva Goswami is a pure devotee. So Vyasadeva having attachment towards Sukadeva is considered like attachment towards the Lord. So that's a big difference. So when a person becomes attached to pure devotee's love of Lord, what happens is one forgets attachment towards. Why it is glorious is because they forget attachment towards material wealth, fame, family, who is materialistic. Not like artificial detachment, but detachment from within the heart, but outwardly he's performing his duties, what he's supposed to. So intact, one forgets attachment towards one's own body when someone is attached to pure devotees of the Lord. So that's how Prahlad Maharaj also prays this essence in his prayers to Narasimhadev. So in text 3, Narada Muni is telling Jiva, he is not revealing to uh, people of palace that Narada is speaking through the child. You actually accept, Narada Muni is saying, you accept the opulences of your father. You died very untimely. And you come back and accept these opulences and live the rest of your Ayush, that means remaining rest. You have left untimely, you still have some life left in this body. So what is the reply of Jiva? That is what you can see from 4th verse. What is the reply given by Jiva to Narada Muni's point? Let's see. From 4th verse, from mystic power of Narada Muni, living entity re-entered the dead body for a short time and spoke in reply to Narada Muni's request. He said, according to the results of fruitive actions, I, the living being, transmigrate from one body to another. This is the little boy Jiva speaking. According to my fruitive acts, I transmigrated from one body to another, sometimes going to the species of demigods, sometimes species of lower animals, sometimes among the vegetables, sometimes to the human species. Therefore, in which birth were these my mother and father? No one is actually my brother and father. Now, how can I accept these two people as my parents, dear Narada? So this is the reply given by Jiva. The very first statement he spoke is very profound, surprising. So these 8 verses spoken by Jiva from 4th to 11th. So Jiva, right in the beginning, flatly is denying that uh, Chitraketu and Krutajuti are not his parents. He's saying that Kasmin Janmani Ami Mahyam. In which birth? Kasmin Janmani. Petaro Mataro Bhavan. Were these my father and mother? I don't think so. Karma bhir Brahmya Manasya. Because I have been uh, because I have been wandering according to my karma in different wombs in different species. Devatirgi and Nara Yonishu. So that is why, if you see from his words, what we can observe, the lesson is that mm, the attachment of a maintainer towards the maintained actually is greater than the attachment of uh, maintained towards the maintainer. So parents put so much effort to maintain the child, only few years, but attachment towards this living entity is greater than the attachment of living entity towards their parents. That's a surprising, wonderful creation of Lord. Sometimes when uh, devotees who are very young, when they join ashram, what happens, as you know, uh, technically they are supposed to be detached from the family in order to take that decision. So some become monks because that's what they like to. Some would like to be grihasthas and maintain the family relations. So, but what we should those still those renunciants, those brahmacharis, trainees are not supposed to exhibit the hard-heartedness towards the parents by referring to this particular instance and trying to imitate like this jiva or from the statements of Narada Muni. So one should not try to imitate this, though they are trying up and trying to be a monk. They're not supposed to be hard-hearted like this, bluntly mentioning these statements to his parents. So uh, these are spoken out of immaturity if it is spoken without a proper context and knowledge. And it also signifies hard-heartedness if one does so. That includes if somebody is trying to ignore their parents for they being not spiritual, it is nothing but immaturity and hard-heartedness. The result of this jiva speaking in this way becomes, that actually is meant to enlighten the lamenting souls there, and others also become Krishna conscious. That is the outcome. So this is a glorious act of Narada Muni, where the outcome is basically everybody is becoming detached and becoming Krishna conscious, trying to uh, go towards the path of becoming Krishna conscious. Um, so whether my heart is matured, whether my heart is soft enough with a realized knowledge, that is to be questioned before we even try to attempt these statements. Anyways, and so so here it seems like the jiva, after leaving the body, when he is asked to come back, he exhibited the characteristics that he doesn't seem to have any attachment, right? He doesn't seem to have any attachment from his statements. In which birth were you my parents? So Srila Prabhupada in the purport says the body created by so-called father and mother actually has nothing to do with so-called creators. Therefore, This is the reason living entity flatly denied that Chitraketu and his wife were not his father and mother. So, and further, Jiva preaches in this material world, which advances like a river but carries away the living entity, all people become friends, relatives, enemies in due course of time. They also act neutrally, they mediate, they despise one another, and they act in many other relationships. Nonetheless, despite these various transactions, no one is permanently related. Bhavanti karma so mitaha, gradually. So here the essence is no one is permanently related in this world. You're actually lamenting at the death of me, but rather you should rejoice because I have been an enemy of you in your previous life. Bandhu Jnati Ari Madhyastha Mitro Dasina Vidvisha. This is what Prabhupada also explains in the purport, that this Jiva who caused the lamentation right after the birth, he didn't stay much longer, but who is supposed to cause the jubilation for the parents has caused the deep lamentation within a very short time. That means he is the enemy of his in his previous life. That's how he is taking a revenge. So that's how you can consider from the purport of Prabhupada. A person becomes relative to through marriage uh, and also becomes an enemy. Sometimes Bandhu here refers to kingsman through marriage. Jnati is referring to paternal relative. So person becomes false friend also, who, as you can see, Madhyastha is actually a false friend who is trying to act neutral, is never a friend. That's what it is mentioned. So people take up these multiple roles. These relations, at one time being a friend, could actually become an enemy at one point also. So these relationships are not permanent because these are emanated out of the bodily relationship, identification with this body. So instead of thinking here, what is it is inferred? Instead of thinking, I lost my son and lamenting about it, instead of that, you could have rejoiced my death. This is what the boy is inferring. You could have rejoiced my death because I have been an enemy in your previous life. So son with good qualities who dies is actually an enemy because he gives great sorrow. Son with good qualities who dies before parent dies is actually an enemy because he gives greater sorrow. So we can, from one perspective, that incident is the cause of lamentation. From another perspective, it could be the cause of happiness also, right? Uh, and when we read from different angles of vision, why we are trying to read from the different angles? It's not speculation, but rather from different angles of vision. When we analyze the Shastra through the commentaries of Acharyas and Prabhupada, when we and and we understand this contradictory siddhanta which is mentioned in the scriptures through the vision of the explanations of uh, Acharyas, what happens is uh, Prabhupada says in one of his purports that they can actually maintain their Krishna consciousness fresh and alive by doing this activity. So this is the reason why we try to understand scriptures scrutinizingly. And Jiva in this next verse is explaining, illustrating the same point like a previous verse, which is verse number 5. Now we are discussing sixth verse. Living entity will take birth of from a particular father, and this child becomes an object of affection for that father and mother. But what? But the problem is, as soon as the child leaves the body, he goes to the transmigrates to the next destination. What happens? The relationship also gets transferred to someone else, and this is explained how this father and mother is no longer related to that child. because the body is lost, because their attachment was primarily to the body. And this was, in order to explain this, the Jiva is actually trying to explain how the gold coins, the commodity, are transferred from somebody to another person. Even they could even transfer the gold coins that are in the possession of one person could be transferred to a person who is his enemy, which were source of his enjoyment at one point. They could also cause a source of destruction if that enemy uses those gold coins to destruct him. But here, the same gold coins could also cause jubilation and source of happiness to the other person who received it. At one point, these gold coins were related to the different person. So similarly, the jiva is also, when the relationship ends with the bodily termination, the relationship and affection that is outcome of this relationship also get transferred to someone else. So this is a wonderful analogy. Srila Prabhupada writes in second para, living entity has no control of selecting his parents. He has no control of selecting his father and mother. Father and mother do not give birth to a child, whereas laws of nature force a jiva to accept particular father and mother. So Prakriti is the, Prakriti kriyamani and gunai karmani sarvashaha. Sometimes living entity is mentioned to be the doer, right? Article. So actually there is a wonderful, um, let me cut short actually. So in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is writing purport in a sense of living entity has no control in selecting his father and mother. So one extreme of a living entity as a behavior or consciousness is becoming proud that I am the doer. Though in that verse, Lord reminds Jiva, Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvada hankaram iti yamme bhina prakriti rashtada. In that verse, what Lord is saying is reminding the Jiva, without help of a Lord, super soul, Jiva cannot do anything. That's what Lord is reminding. But the extreme of this Jiva, of one category of Jivas, is that they think that I am the doer. But Lord reminds, you are not. The another extreme of another category of living entities is sometimes living entity goes to extreme that Lord is responsible for everything. And material nature is doer, which is acting on the direction of the Lord. So definitely Lord is the one who is responsible for my misery. So this is another extreme. Because Lord himself clarified, Nadatte kasyachit papam nachaiva sakrutam vibhu. Ajnanena avrutam jnanam tena muhyati jantava. Krishna says, the Supreme Lord doesn't assume one's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance, which covers their real ignorance. They think that he accepts both sinful and pious acts of our living entities, but actually not, because Krishna himself confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Jiva, it's the responsibility of Jiva because he made that choice. So here, another beautiful point that Srila Prabhupada is saying is that getting a father and mother is not difficult. Anybody, even a cat and a dog will also easily get a mother and father. When they move from one species to another, he continues to get mother and father in every life. Not at all a difficult thing. But getting a bona fide spiritual master is very difficult. Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagyavana Jiva Guru Krishna Prasade Paya Bhakti Lata Pija. Person who gets bona fide spiritual master should grab that opportunity to make a spiritual advancement. That is another excellent point that Srila Prabhupada mentioned in this verse. Verse number 7 talks about the Jiva continues to speak. Temporary nature of relationships. When we see one lifetime to another lifetime, even with this particular lifetime, even in this life, relationships between living entities are temporary. Example given is an animal gets, Prabhupada mentions in his translation, animal, a pet animal is transferred from one person to another. He loses the affection to that animal because he's no longer in the possession of the animal. Within the same lifetime, as long as relationships last, one has possessiveness of the object. And Angira first came to meet Chitraketu, if you remember. And um, yeah, I think we already discussed about. So um, Angira actually mentioned that your son is going to die, but he didn't pay attention to that point. But he was more paying attention to, oh, I'm going to get a son. That's called selective hearing. So selective hearing during the time of overwhelming situations, we should make sure that our hearing is perfect when we are conversing with anyone. Our situation of distress should not affect our hearing, because it could cause a greater distraction at later time if we don't pay attention to the hearing. So, and text 8 talks about even a continue. Jiva is refusing to re-enter the body. Reason he gave is in that verse in text number 8 is because I have no longer identified with that body, because Jiva has entered a body is actually without specific material identity. As long as Jiva stays in the body, he identifies himself as son of that so and so particular father. So simple, just like a person who is acting a role in a drama, as soon as the play is finished, he says, I no longer, if let's say if somebody who liked the drama says, oh, you're no longer in that costume. What happened to you? You will say, I no longer identify with that role now. Drama is over, right? I don't have any beard. Drama is over. So this is what exactly Jiva is exhibiting here. Jiva is flatly denying. So next text number 9, the verse Jiva is describing nature of a soul, right? This verse can take it can indicate a soul, quality of a soul, or it can indicate the quality of a supreme Lord. So this is actually having a dual meaning. Esho Nicho, Lord is eternal, imperishable beyond perception. Material eye cannot see, subtle, sukshma. Lord is eternal, imperishable beyond perception to material eye. But living entity is eternal, imperishable, eternally small. Sukshma indicates here for Jiva, eternally small. But for Lord, it's just indicating nobody is very subtle and nobody can perceive him. That's what it indicates. Lord is the shelter of everything and he is a self-manifesting, whereas Jiva is the cause of different types of bodies. He is basic principle of those bodies. Right? Yesha Sarvashraya Swadruk. That's what it means. Lord creates universe through gunas of material Maya. Atma Maya, Atma Maya Gunair Vishwam. Lord creates universe through gunas of material Maya. Whereas his Jiva's bodies are created by material nature under the control of Supreme Lord. That's the difference. The last line, Atmanam Srujate Prabhu. That master, Lord creates himself as universe. Right? Whereas Jiva, he is responsible for his own conditional life. Prabhu, he is also Prabhu, but he is responsible for his own conditional life. The next verse talks about there is a wonderful living if a living entity is accepted as a small s, naturally the inquiry about the greatest will happen. Lord is Vibhu, Jiva is Anu. If Jiva realizes that with that knowledge that I am insignificant, then naturally Prabhupada says he will start inquiring about that greatest Vibhu. So this living entity is responsible for conditioned life in the material world, and therefore he is described as Prabhu. If he likes, he can come into this material world, and if this Jiva doesn't like, he can return, go back to the Godhead. So next verse talks about also the differences, continuation of the differences between soul and super soul. Lord is no one is for Lord, no one is dear, nor anyone is unfavorable. Nahi asti priya kaschin apriya swapriyo piva. But whereas for the Jiva, in his pure condition, no distinctions of dear, not dear, own person is a different person don't exist. No distinctions for a pure soul. So it's pretty much equal to that of a Lord with respect to that particular quality. He is one without a second. Lord is one without a second, the witness of all jivas with various types of intelligence. Yesha sarva dhyam drashta. But Jiva acts in terms of a friend and enemy in relation to the others. Right? This is explanation given by Jiva about the distinction between Jiva and Supersoul. Just by what he's inferring by saying that mm, now you should inquire on that Supreme Soul who is Vibhu, who is greatest. So that is what Jiva is trying, that is why he's trying to give the distinction between Jiva and Supreme Lord in this verse, 10th and 9th. And now, last verse for today, and what he's saying, this is similar to Bhagavad Gita verse, right? And the creator and cause of effect does not accept the happiness and distress that result from the fruitive actions because he doesn't have any fruitive actions to perform. So, nadate kasyachit papam nachaiva sukrutam vibhu. So, that verse is a parallel to this verse 11. So, Supreme Lord does not accept happiness and distress that result from fruitive actions. He is completely independent of having to accept a material body because he is so great. You also, in order to come out of the result of these fruitive actions, should take his shelter. That's what Jiva is inferring here in this verse. That's what Prabhupada also highlighted. Otherwise, it is very difficult to overcome the grief, my dear Chitraketu and other relatives who are lamenting. So nobody, and by going through these lamentations, you will never be able to cross the samsara. But if you take shelter of that Supreme Lord, who is beyond the fruitive acts, you can cross this samsara. So that is the essence of today's purpose, dear devotees. And thank you so much for your association. If any questions, please kindly let me know. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. Hare.
Thank you so much,
Krishna,
Prabhuji.
Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare